The team is simply focused on getting that SRC, or the sample canister rather, on a nitrogen purge. And this is to maintain that pristine nature and prevent any kind of contaminants from the atmosphere from getting into our sample within.
Recovery operations. Kilos 3 and 4 have been cleared to land at the recovery site.
And the rest of the team is closely behind, ready to land at the recovery site to begin operations. This will be simultaneous action that you'll see here once we have the clearance from Stu Wiley to begin our recovery operations. At least from this perspective, I'm not noticing really any drag marks or any kind of roll marks, but the team, once they approach, will mark any possible areas of interest where the SRC possibly came in contact with the rough desert terrain. All of these regions will be sampled by our recovery team and will be passed off to the sample curation team at the Johnson Space Center. As they begin to unload and actually open up the sample canister there, exploring the contents within and making sure that no possible contaminants from the surrounding landing location got into our sample. We're getting a wider view now. We should have the helicopters that have landed nearby coming into view, potentially. The team really taking extra precaution as they approach the SRC. As I mentioned, team member safety is paramount during these operations. There are possible potential areas of concern as the team begin these operations, including the temperature of that SRC. You see it looks quite charred there. It could still be a little bit warm. As I mentioned, it heated up to over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So as the cool desert air begins to cool down that SRC, we want to make sure that it is cool enough for our team to actually begin those recovery operations. We'll also be checking the gas levels of that SRC to make sure that it is not outgassing from the batteries within, heating up during that reentry. We'll also be making sure that there is no live voltage present. And we see a view now from our high-altitude plane that has visual of those helicopters landed nearby, just at the northern part of your screen. You can see one of them on screen now. The top of your screen there, it is centered up. There is our helicopter, and it appears that we have our on-scene commander potentially walking over. This is, once again, our high-altitude WB-57 shot of our helicopters landed at the LZ, our landing zone. You can see some movement on the screen. It appears some team members might be approaching our SRC at this point to begin those recovery operations, the initial safety sweep. We'll just be observing from this high altitude for the next coming minutes as the team actually will be setting up a camera on the ground for us to observe the recovery operations close up. And a note from one of the team members about the SRC itself. So they have approximately 40 hours. That is the amount of time it would take for any air to get into the sample. As I mentioned before, that sample return capsule is a complex network of piping and tubing inside of it, sort of like a labyrinth-like design. And that is intentional to make it incredibly difficult for any possible contaminants from the atmosphere to get into our sample canister. It's also sort of like a nesting doll, if you will, where it has multiple layers of protection that keep that sample safe within. All of that protective layering, once we get that sample into the clean room, will be shed, and we'll be able to actually access that sample canister within. The main goal, as I said, for today is to get that sample canister on a nitrogen purge. That is to maintain its pristine nature. And we have visual once again from one of our helicopters here orbiting around the landing location. You can see our SRC at the bottom left of your screen and its parachute that helped us get the last leg of the journey down. It deployed a little bit higher than we expected, 20,000 feet elevation. Original expectation was at about 5,000 feet. And this brought us down the last leg of the journey after a punishing initial entry into Earth's atmosphere over San Francisco, about 82 miles in altitude, to now resting on the rugged Utah Test and Training Range desert floor.
Recovery operations. Recovery team is in the vicinity, beginning their initial assessments.
So you just heard confirmation from Tim Preiser that the team is beginning to actually approach the SRC for that initial environmental and safety sweep. You'll soon see our on-scene commander, Oscar, Stu Wiley, approaching that sample return capsule. As I mentioned before, he'll be checking for any possible unexploded ordnances. You can see our mission operations team. They have been overseeing all of this morning's events, and they're going to continue. There we go on screen. You can see front and center there, Stu Wiley, our on-scene commander, and right behind him is Victoria team. They are both wearing personal protective equipment, gas masks. That's for their own safety as they approach. As there could be potential out from that sample return capsule's batteries heating up during re-entry. You can see him scanning the region. He is checking for any possible unexploded ordnances, UXOs.
Recovery operations. Oscar's